I met Andrew, I think he maybe had been a member for a while. I don't really remember, but I put out the word. We're having, it was either a Shark Tank night or a deal or no deal type of event. And I put the request out was who would come in and be one of my experts to say if it was a deal. And Andrew's like, I will. I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah.
I'll do it. And I'm like, okay, who are you? I'm like, okay, well, nobody, I can't get people that want to be experts, but I'm like, okay, what?
I thought it was important.
Well, no, I just didn't know who you were, so I'm like, I'm putting something on the stage, but you could answer questions, you knew what you're talking about, but I hadn't met you yet, and you came up, and you were willing your first 6 months or less at MAREI to be a volunteer and do something. I will give you a word of advice. Anybody here that goes to another group that has a board where they elect people, never miss a meeting if they have elections, because if you miss a meeting, they will volunteer you and you're going to come back the next meeting and they're going to say, oh, you got elected president last month. So you're lucky, Andrew, I never elected you the Queen Dictator of MAREI. But if you missed a meeting, I could have elected you Queen Dictator. I don't know. We don't have presidents here. And then in 2011, I go, well, hey, this guy knows his stuff. Because he'd been coming to meetings, and I've seen him a few times on this website called Bigger Pockets. Anybody seen Bigger Pockets? Anybody seen Andrew on Bigger Pockets? I'm like, yeah, he seems to know what he's talking about. So he and his brother and his father came in and did a Saturday workshop, which is an excellent workshop. We've been sharing a lot of those videos. Andrew has everything recorded for posterity on the internet, so I'm able to share all that stuff out with you. And it was a fabulous class. I don't know if anybody was here way back in 2011. I think it was 2011. I went to the class back then. We were at Career Education Systems in a much smaller room. It was very good. And then I kept seeing Andrew on podcasts. And then I saw him on other things all over the internet. Everywhere I went, it was either Eddie Speed or Andrew Sirius at the time. Those are everywhere I went, everywhere. And I got to know him some more, and then I asked him to come back and do another workshop in 2017, which Andrew and Philip came in and graciously did. I was trying to do another workshop this month, but it was just, there was too much going on for everybody to be able to put on a workshop, so it just didn't work out. But I've learned something as I've been watching Andrew and Philip. They really know how to explain things in ways people can understand. So I have been sharing a lot of their YouTube videos, so I want you to look for some of these. You can write them down. I'm sure Andrew's going to ask you to sign up to get some more information about these maybe. But if you're on YouTube and you subscribe to channels on YouTube, look for the Sirius Brothers on YouTube, and that's S-Y-R-I-O-S. But Sirius. They have great 9 to 10 minute videos on all different kinds of subjects that explain it so you can understand it. And it's very relevant and worth watching, even if they're talking about eating marshmallows. I really like the marshmallow video. I like that. They contribute it to MAREI regularly, and then they have a new website, andrewsirios.substack.com. Is that right? Okay. So check those out. Do I have any more slides? That's it. So I want everybody to put their hands together and welcome Andrew to the stage.
Water. Parched.
Me too. This room is dry.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a touch screen and it won't touch. There we go.
So do we have it set up with the timer? Okay.
I don't think we've made it this far. And if the clicker decides it doesn't want to work, well, we'll punch.
We'll see what happens. All right, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you all coming out tonight. Again, Andrew Sirius. This is my brother Philip. We do YouTube channels and invest. He abandoned me today, and I'll be on my own. So shame on you, Philip. I'm really deeply ashamed. So this presentation was going to be substantially different when we first talked about it back in January, and I had to make some substantial changes to it because of what happened last month and this month when the Federal Reserve kind of went nuts and then the markets went nuts as well. Because the original pitch was basically Burr is hibernating, the Burr strategy, and now it's time to look at how to take advantage of this market. Now, things are starting to move back in the other direction. You may have noticed interest rates going up a little bit, inflation kind of out of control. So I think the way to look at this presentation, first we're going to start with why buy and hold is so great for those who are still on the fence about that, even when the market's volatile, because buy and hold is a long-term proposition. And then we'll get into why the market is / more likely was bad for the Burr method, and why that's probably coming back, and how to take advantage of such a market, and how to approach the sort of economic volatility we have right now, the rising interest rates, the inflation, just how to look at markets and all of those things put together and figure out where exactly the advantages are, where exactly to approach them. So, as Kim mentioned, please, if you could be so kind, if you look for us on YouTube, the Serious Brothers. We have a lot of videos, usually try to post one a week. If you subscribe, that'd be great. If you don't want to be successful, don't bother. Philip doesn't write. He likes talking but not writing. I'm just gonna like just bash it on. I think that's right. So the Serious Brother, drop the S. That's my Substack. And in addition, I'm putting together a series of courses and talks on investor-agent combination. I'm also an agent for EXP. So either working as an investor-agent combination or working with investors. Anyone who is an agent or considering becoming one with the XP or without, doesn't matter. I might make a pitch for it. I'd have to fit into the stereotype in that regard. But I'm going to have Phil pass around a notepad if you want to sign up, if you have any interest in that course and those discussions regarding agent investor stuff. Or I have a book eventually coming out. Some of you may remember this. I did discuss it in 2017. This is kind of to my shame. I have a list. People, I still have your email addresses if you signed up on that list. But if you're interested in this, the original project fell apart, and then now we're going to repurpose it for our YouTube channel as sort of a complementary thing with that. If you're interested in that, for people who are willing to share it, share our YouTube channel and also give us a review, I'd be happy to offer a free PDF of that book once it comes out, which will probably be at the end of the year. So please just sign up if you're interested. I'd very much appreciate it. Okay, so the real quick Cliff's Notes version of why buy and hold is so powerful and why it's sort of enduring, even in volatile markets, even really right before the cliff. If you do it right, it can still be decent. So the first one is just the ideal method. This is a term I think our father coined, maybe. I don't know. We're going to save it. I mean, that sounds like the familial pride or something. But the I is income. So you have the cash flow if you buy right, particularly in the Midwest. Not so much if you do it on the coast. I don't think it matters in New York. You're not in cash flow. But you can have a positive cash flow. Now, this is the cherry on top. It's not something that you should think of like, okay, you'll see this from time to time. People are like, okay, if I buy 20 properties, I can have enough cash flow to live off of it. It usually doesn't work like that. This is the cherry on top, but it is a very nice cherry. Depreciation is a tax benefit. For some reason, the federal government considers a property to lose, residential property, to lose 1/27.5 of its value every year. So after 27.5 years, you buy property for $275,000. Every year it loses $10,000 of value. A little more complicated than that because there's the property value, there's the land value. Land value is usually 20%. That stays constant. But the property's value, the IRS thinks goes down to zero at 1/27.5 a year for some reason. That means if you have that property I just mentioned, $275,000 is your purchase price. You lose, quote unquote, $10,000 every year, and so if you made $10,000 of cash flow, the IRS says you made nothing because you depreciated $10,000. Your income taxes are zero. We have not paid income taxes in a long time. We get hit pretty hard on property taxes, but we have not paid income taxes in a long time. Now, if you do sell the property, you will have to recapture that loss, but you can do what's called a 1031 exchange into another property and defer that income tax hit again, or that capital gains tax in that case. And even if you just keep the property until you die, then your kids can inherit it at a stepped-up basis and really never have to pay the tax, at least as it is now. Long-term debt is really what makes buy and hold real estate so powerful. And one of the things, if you get long-term debt, you want to get out of private loans, interest-only loans, hard money loans as quickly as possible. With long-term debt, you're paying down principal every month, 20-year amortization. Over 20 years, you will pay off your entire loan. I've actually ran the numbers on this. Your return on investment, if you put 20% down with no appreciation and no cash flow, nothing, is almost 6% if you pay off the loan over this 20 years. Now, that's nothing to write home about, but that's only principal paydown. And that's a number that generally people will be like, oh yeah, that's okay. 6% not too bad. Real estate has appreciated approximately 4.6% per year over the last 50 years, and a lot more of late, if you haven't noticed. And so it will generally keep a little bit faster than inflation is the way it's been going. And you can really take advantage of that with leverage. If you buy a property you put 80%, or you put 20% down, 80% loan, then if the property goes up 5%, that's on the whole purchase price. On your 20% investment, it's actually gone up 25%. Now, of course, that's a two-edged sword, but with real estate, okay, sorry. We'll get to that in a second. So this is just an example to show kind of the exponential quality of it. Just a few assumptions: purchase price of $100,000, down payment $20,000, so your loan is $80,000. 80% LTV, interest rate of 5.5%, actually still a little high now. 25-year amortization, and the historical average, just 4.6% appreciation. Nothing like what we've been seeing in the crazy run-up. And this is what it would look like. So, as you can see, the blue line is the property's value, the red line is your mortgage debt, and the green line is the amount of equity you have over and above your original $20,000 investment. And as you can see, this blue arrow is linear. It becomes exponential. And this is nothing special. This is buying at market price with a above current rates interest loan and just the historical average appreciation. Yet even with that, after 15 years, I know you can't read that, but it's 43% return on investment year over year. So long-term real estate is not something, it's not a short-term get-rich-quick scheme, it's a get-rich-slow scheme. And of course, leverage is a two-edged sword, but real estate has the added advantage of being able to find motivated sellers, to find value-added propositions, just deals that are below market value. It's an inefficient market, that every property is its own market, so to speak. And so if you have a market value of $100,000, you buy for $80,000, $20,000 of equity, market goes down 10%, you still have $10,000 of equity. There's no two-edged sword here. You didn't lose 25% because you have an 80% loan to value. You just lost half of the equity that was built into the property to begin with. So because real estate is an inefficient market, you can take advantage of the benefits of leverage without the risks. Or at least, that's a little bit overstated, without as much of the risks. You can really mitigate the risks with real estate. This is why buy and hold is sort of enduring. It's really where wealth is in real estate, is to buy assets and hold them in the long term. The BRRRR strategy, the strategy that Philip and I and our father have basically done since we got here in 2011 is sort of like flipping a property to yourself. You buy it with the goal is to buy it with a 25% or more built-in equity after the rehab. So you buy it, you rehab it, then you rent it out, and then you refinance out either the cash you invested into the property or you refinance out a private loan. We usually put private loans on at about 8% from various people who are, don't want to get the CDs or the rates of return you're getting in a bank account or CD or money market or thing like that. You will need you'll need the property to season. So a bank will lend to you at the appraised value and not how much money you have into it. Usually the minimum is about 6 months. Although some of our lenders will do it as soon as the property is rented just because we have a strong relationship with them. And then you just repeat this. That's the BRRRR. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And this strategy is great. Instead of using that 25% equity, built-in equity from buying right and rehabbing the property, instead of using that as your profit margin in a flip, you use that as the down payment in a hold. And that way, if you have no money into the property when you refinance it, or we usually settle for a low money. I think our average is about 81% is what we're all into our properties for. So BRRRR went cold. No? That would be a bad joke for you to you. My brother does a lot of very, very lame puns. But the BRRRR method is not dead. It's we've done a couple of BRRRRs over the last couple of years. We've done some like a portfolio that was a BRRRR deal. We've done some houses that were, but it's harder to find. And one of the big reasons they're so much harder to find is this number right here. This is Jackson County, Missouri, March 2022. And that there is the amount of supply left on the market, 0.8 months of inventory. So that means if there are 1,000 houses sold in the month of March, there are 800 going into the month of April. There are more houses sold each month than there are left in the market, and a balanced market that doesn't favor buyers or sellers is 6 months. So we're close to 10 times what a balanced market is in favor of the seller. It's tough. I mean, there are plenty of cases. Somebody, say an out-of-state landlord who doesn't want to deal with properties, willing to sell for a discount because they just don't want to think about it. But if you're in a situation where you're behind on your payments or you don't want to deal with it, just list it. And so that makes it very difficult. It's difficult to find those BRRRR deals. Not impossible, but more difficult. And also you have to take into account marketing costs. Some people, you'll see these on like Facebook and social media a lot. Like, oh, here's my check for $80,000. I just did this flip. I'm so awesome. And it's like we got allocated operating expenses that are not put towards the property. So if you have $100,000 in marketing costs and you flipped 2 houses and made $90,000 in profit, you actually lost $10,000. And it's weird. Gurus don't like to emphasize that fact. It's shocking, I know. But just some of the statistics from December, and this is from the end of last year. So things have changed. I will get to that. Hold your horses. So home prices hit a record 359,000. Prices were up 14% year over year. Active listings down 22% from 2020, down almost 41%. There's almost half as many active listings as there were in just 2019, right before the COVID. 45% of listings had an accepted offer in the first 2 weeks, 32% the first week. And the average sale to price ratio was over full asking price, 100.5%. This right here, this is a really interesting chart. This is just from the Fed. This is home prices since 2000. You see, here's the Great Recession. Here's the financial crisis. If you bought right there and just held it, you're doing fine. I mean, if you could get through that crash, so even if you bought at the absolute peak, that really puts it in perspective. I think it peaked out at about 265, 270, fell down to a trough of just over 200, and right now it's budging over 400. So this is kind of the summation of the presentation, or our theory, so to speak. Actually, Philip's not talking, so it's just my theory. It's mine alone. He had no part. But in 2011, when we first got here, I got here on January 4th, 2011, it was a smorgasbord of REOs, bank-owned properties, dilapidated houses. I mean, we'd go on these property tours. We'd go look at 15 houses. We'd make offers on 13 of them. We'd get 2 maybe. And I have a lot of nostalgia for that time. I'm sure a lot of people think like, oh, I wish I had gotten started back in 2011, 2010, or whatever. But the problem was there was no lenders. We got rejected over and over and over and over. And we had the benefit of having, our father's company behind us. And so we had some financial strength, but it just didn't matter. It would constantly get these lenders who were like, oh yeah, we're very interested in doing that. And then like 2 or 3 weeks after we submitted it, or sometimes months later, they'd be like, oh, you get that call, and you know exactly what they're going to say as soon as they start talking. It's like, yeah, so, I brought it to committee, and, they took a lot of losses in this sector, and, so unfortunately, and it's like all these positive down to negative, but we got one lender to lend to us between 2011 and 2015, or middle of 2015. 6.5% interest, 15-year amortization, and 2 years of seasoning. So they would only lend at the cost room to the property unless we owned it for a full 2 years. And that was the only lender that lent to us. Now, it's the opposite, or at least a couple months ago, it was the opposite. Cheap loans everywhere, lots of lenders. I don't remember the last time we had a lender say no to us. Of course, they still have to do their debt service, coverage estimates and all their due diligence and whatnot. But there are lots of lenders, the rates are extremely low. I just bought a home back in August of last year at 3% interest, 30-year fixed mortgage, which is just a farce. I mean, it's a joke of a loan, and I'm not refinancing that one ever. And I've heard of loans in the 2%. Now those are gone. 2022, the question marks, my presentation had to make a few adjustments. So this is effectively the way to think of things. Whenever you're thinking, I missed it, I didn't have, I'm too late. The market's, the opportunity to buy low, with all the REOs and foreclosures, that's gone. The opportunity to get those great loans is gone. Well, either whenever there are low rates, there aren't a lot of deals. Whenever there are high rates, there are many deals. So when lending is easy, it's going to be hard to find properties. When lending is hard, it's going to be easier to find properties, but harder to get them financed. So we are moving back towards the middle. We're definitely not 2011. 2021, 2020, the COVID years, when everybody thought the market was going to collapse, and the exact opposite happened. That seems to be in the past now too. But where we end up exactly isn't for sure. But the market is going to soften because of this, meaning there are going to be more opportunities there. So whenever you think that thought, I've missed it, you haven't. There's always opportunities available. You just have to play it. You have to just look at where they are and how to look at those. So rates are obviously going up. We have the Fed hiked rates for the first time since COVID started. They expect 6 rate hikes this year to get the federal funds rate to 1.9%. Next year to 2.8%. Although who knows if they stick with that. And interest rates have been climbing. They're almost up a full. This is from NerdWallet. They're almost up a full 1% from where they were a year and a half ago. But I don't, now we're moving a little bit more into speculation, in my opinion, where to think about things. So all the disclaimers and caveats and stuff like that. But I do not believe it's too late. I think inflation is unlikely to go away. And so what that means is everything is relative. And in a high inflationary environment, the latest report was 8.5%. In a high inflationary environment, which is the worst since the early 80s, you have to think in terms of real versus nominal. If the low inflation environment we've been in before, the real and nominal were pretty close to each other. So if you have 2% inflation and your rate of return is 6%, you can almost just kind of pretend inflation doesn't exist. But nowadays, if inflation is 8%, then and your return is 4%, then you're actually going backwards. So you need to think in real versus nominal. And interest rates are still way below inflation. We priced out a handful of interest rates from different banks recently. We are in the kind of 4.25% to 5.25% range. I don't know. I've heard people getting higher. I've heard some people getting lower. I think a lot of it still. These are from local banks that we've been seeing that from. That is still several points below inflation. We still have 8.5% inflation versus 4 to 5% interest rates, which means if they're basically if you have money and you're lending at 4 to 5%, inflation is 8.5%, assuming that's going to stay the same. You are losing money in a real sense, not in a nominal sense, but in a real sense. You are losing money just by lending it, and you're making money just by borrowing. So I still think that interest rates are low, although I don't know how much longer this is going to last. So that's something to keep in mind. This right here is also something to keep in mind. For those who think interest rates are high right now, they are not at all. So this is the federal funds, the discount rate for the Federal Reserve. This is the rate that they lend to banks at. So if a bank borrows at 2%, they're usually pop 3 on top of it, lend it 5. They'll say the 3, 6, 3. Borrow 3, lend it 6, hit the golf course by 3. So that is but this is historical. Okay, we're right here. This is so we went through the Great Recession. It was going up. This is the .com bust. Going up, they were going up a little bit. Great Recession dropped it all the way down basically to 0. And then, I'm sorry, I'm all backwards here. This is the Great Recession. And then it started to go up again. This is COVID, down to 0. And now they bumped it up 0.25. If they bring it up to 2.8 in 2023, it'll be right here, below the historical average. That is the early 80s, when the last time we had major inflation. And they had to bring rates up into the teens in order to get it under control. So we are not in a high interest rate environment, despite what it feels like. So if you look at it in There is a lot of talk that inflation will cool off, hopefully when the war in Ukraine ends, hopefully soon. I think that is highly optimistic. I think a lot of the sanctions will stay. I think the world is probably bifurcating. I think the Cold War is back. That is a little speculative. But regardless, inflation is a monetary phenomenon. And this chart is the amount of money they've been printing, and it's a lot. And you especially see it just keeps getting sharper and sharper, especially around COVID. I haven't verified this, but I've heard something like 80% of the dollars printed were printed since the beginning of COVID, since 2020. Yeah, the last 2.5 years. And so inflation, even if the sanctions end and war ends, all those things stop, even if somehow relations cool entirely, this is still here and is not going away. Inflation is unlikely to go away, especially since interest rates aren't even high right now, and they're not. But actually, this means the market's about to collapse. I'm sure some people are thinking that. And so I would like to make my case right now for those who want to sit on the sideline why it's not going to collapse, or at least I don't think so. In my opinion, lots of caveats. It might collapse. If it does, we will delete these recordings. If this ever having happened, or me ever having said this. Or perhaps, if my memory serves, that case, Philip gave this presentation, I think. Right? Yeah. I was opposed to it, no. But no, I do not think the market's going to collapse for several reasons. The first one is just general inflation. There's a housing shortage. There's a lack of ninjas, and politics in general. So inflation, again, as I said, nominal versus real is an important concept to keep in your mind, and inflation does not necessitate a correction. Inflation can go on a very long time. Eventually, if we get another Paul Volcker like we had in the late 70s and early 80s, and he finally just pulls the plug, yes, the economy will go into a deep recession, but it won't be a real estate-driven recession, it'll be an entire recession. There was no housing bust in the 70s. And this is what to keep in mind. This is real estate versus inflation in the 1970s and early 80s, right before. As you can see, every year is positive, including 1982 when they pulled the plug. 1982 is when Volcker decided to jack interest rates through the roof to break the back of inflation. Even then, real estate went up 1%. Now that varies by markets. That was below inflation, but during the stagflation of the late 70s and early 80s, real estate kept pace with inflation. So there's no necessity of a correction, and I also don't think there's any reason to think inflation is going to even go away next decade. But the bigger one is that supply and demand is undefeated, and right now, demand is winning in a blowout. Supply is getting wrecked. Construction basically stopped as an exaggeration, but it very much slowed down in 2009 after the crash. This is a look at housing starts. So every year between 2000 and the crash, there was at least 1 million starts, and there was over 2 million in 2006 and 2007. That dropped down below 500,000 and didn't get back up to 1 million until COVID, and then everything stopped. All of construction stopped, every project was shut down for weeks, months, and then delays, and lumber shortages, and supply shortages, et cetera, et cetera. I have not verified this chart either, but I've seen it floating around, and it fits with everything else I'm seeing. And in this case, we basically built barely more housing this last decade than was built during the Great Depression. So there's a major housing shortage. The population is continuing to grow. There was not a lot of construction during that time. We've added almost 30 million people since then. And according to Freddie, what's that?
That we know.
That we know. There might be a few more than that. According to Freddie Mac, we have a 3.8 million unit housing shortage. And you can't just flip a switch and have those widgets, produced. These houses and apartments take a while, and in a lot of cities, in a lot of places, it is very hard to get these through permitting, get them through all the zoning issues. I've particularly on the coastal cities and things like that. Even here in Kansas City, it takes a long time to build properties. This glut, or reverse glut. What's the opposite of a glut? The opposite, a negative glut. We'll call it a negative glut. This negative glut will take years to get through. In addition, we have a lack of the ninja loans that plagued us in the years before the Great Recession. The ninja, no income, no job, no assets. This is a complicated stated income. We'll just say you have a job and you make plenty of money, and we'll give you a 95% LTV loan. Or actually back then they do the 80% and then a 20% second, so you just get fully financed. Negative amortization, so you're paying less than interest. And we'll just sell that off to some pension fund in Norway or whatever, slice and dice it 1,000 times over. There's still some of that going on, but not anywhere near what was going on before. The teaser rates where you get a 4% interest, and then after 18 months it jacks up to 9.5% and stuff like that. And then according to this is rarely discussed, and that is just that housing crises are not good for political stability. And the United States is much less politically stable than it was in 2007, 2008. Housing is sort of the third rail, and if anyone has noticed from the response to COVID, they have whatever timidity they had about printing money and dropping interest rates through the floor and all the rest of that stuff, whatever they had back in 2008, that is gone. They have made it very clear they prefer inflation over housing crisis. They will support it from the top with monetary policy, lowering interest rates, and all of that stuff. They'll also probably support from the bottom with direct income supports, as they've done, say, with eviction, the SAFER program. The SAFER program for people who are facing eviction. So, as you can see, we don't need to get into any of the political stuff here, but Republicans and Democrats are going further apart. They don't want to exacerbate this with a housing crisis. And they will do everything in their power to stop it, if it were to come, which I don't think it will, but if it were, I think they will just settle for very, very, very high inflation. Okay, caveat number one, Wall Street. There's been a lot of talk about Wall Street buying up houses and how this is trying to make a nation of renters. People are very upset about this, the pitchforks. But this is very much overstated. Only about 0.5% of single-family residences are owned by institutional investors. And they are not insane. I've actually heard they've stopped buying for the most part, but they are not insane. They're not going to liquidate them all at once. They probably try to slowly get them out. So this is a good talking point, but it doesn't really affect the market or a reason why I think it's going down. But I do not have a crystal ball, and so I could be wrong, or I should say, Philip could be wrong. Philip could be wrong about this if it turns back and we're blank. So just a real quick rundown, 2008 versus 2022, both had very low, the Fed rate was very low. The government pressure to lend was very high, particularly the Community Reinvestment Act and things like that in 2008. It's high now, but not like it was. We had very high inflation now. We did not have it in 2008. There were high LTV loans now, both now and then, but the appraisal fraud, the mortgage fraud, the ninja loans, the state income, and the teaser rates, those were rampant back in 2008 before. Those are mostly gone now. And the big one is the housing supplies flipped. We had a glut in 2008, and we have the exact opposite of it now. And we've seen that the Fed is willing to prop it up basically to whatever degree it needs to. So there is very little reason in my mind to see this as a looming crisis. I think the people who are saying, I'm going to wait for it to correct, are going to be waiting for a while. Mm-hmm. And there is a tendency to be thinking, there's a saying, you don't want to fight the last day of the last war. You want to fight the first day of the next war. Same thing goes with real estate. We have a tendency to think of the last recession, and we forget about what happened before. The signs of what's going on now, the volatility in the market, everything points to the most similar event being the 70s stagflation. That plagued the country from the early 70s until 1982. And so that is my 2 cents on that. But one last caveat, if we do go into a recession, real estate likely will go down. It didn't go down in the COVID recession, and it didn't go down in the dot-com recession. But it probably will, but it will not be the cause of it, and it probably will do better than the rest of the economy because, again, supply is undefeated. Supply and demand are undefeated, and demand is blowing supply out of the water right now. And yeah, we'll probably do for recession pretty soon. Okay, so strategies for low interest rates. Remember, I think that it's not too late. Interest rates are still low when compared to inflation. It's not something where it's like, oh, I'll sit and wait for interest rates to go down. I don't think they're going down. I don't think inflation is going down anytime soon. So I think now is a good time still to take out mortgages if you can get them. And there are 4 strategies that I very much like in this regard, or at least 3 in a small one. Live and hold and house hacking are very similar, but I think this is a great way to get involved. To get started in real estate in a low interest rate environment is a perfect way to get into it. The HELOC and acquire is a nice little note, and then refinance and acquire, and I'll talk about that in a second. With regards to strategies 1 and 2, homeowner rates are just to die for, or at least to borrow against. They're good collateral. They really are something else. Like, again, I mentioned my personal residence, 3% interest, 30-year fixed, 5% down. That's a conventional loan, it's not FHA. FHA is 3.5% down, and you can buy up to a fourplex with it. So if you buy a fourplex with an FHA loan, you're just an investor right there. You have 3 rental units and your place to live. Same with the duplex. Now you're probably not going to get a great deal on it. Some people don't. Some sellers don't want to. Would prefer not to deal with FHA loans just because they're more arduous. They might get a snag. But this type of financing is something that even if you're not getting the best of deal, and you want to get a bit of a deal at least, but even without the best deal there, your deal is great because your financing is great. And so this is, I think, a lot of people want to buy the best house. They want to be the stereotypical American and go the maximum they can get when they're buying their first home. If you are looking to start in there, go one step down. If you can afford $200,000, go $150,000. That way, when you're ready to move on, you can hold the house you're living in and buy your next house. Hold it as a rental, living one step below your means. So when you hear the gurus say stuff like, oh, you have a job, you're so lame, oh, that's pathetic, you got to get out of your job, you got to quit your job, ASAP, it's all about quitting your job. I mean, eventually that'd be great, and that is the goal eventually, but W-2 income is all but essential for real estate investors early on, the foot in the door. Because if you have that W-2 income, you can get the conventional or FHA financing, you can get those, it's not going to be 3% anymore, but it's still going to be very low. It's probably going to be the low 4s. And or maybe mid-4s, but even still, like historically speaking, that's pretty absurd. And so that foot in the door, and then you can keep that loan as an investment when you move out. Now you can only have one FHA loan at a time, but you can have as many conventional loans. Both of the loans on the first house and also the one now were conventional, and you can just go from one to the next to the next. Especially if you're living a little bit below what you can possibly afford, go one step below or 1 or 2 steps below. And then it makes it much easier to hold that property when you're looking to buy a next one. House hacking is just, over here a little comparison, so just to get an idea. This is really broad, but when we're looking at homeowner loans, 3 to 4%, a little bit higher now probably. Investment loans, 4.25% to 5.25%, now moving up to like even 5.5%. The LTV they'll give you 70 to 75%. I don't think we've ever gotten an 80% loan as an investor, whereas we're usually getting like both the ones that I've gotten. I think the one we got was 95%, 20 to 25-year AMs, usually 30-year amortized and fixed for 30 years. Like so, interest goes or inflation goes up to 12% or whatever. My personal loan is still 3%. And with investment loans, it's usually 5 to 10 years fixed. So it's just a much better loan product. With house hacking, that's you live in and you do the repairs while you're there. Another great way to get started. Remember, time is money. This is one of the best foot in the door strategies, but you do want to eventually move on and outsource a lot of that. I have a friend in Poughkeepsie, New York, who has like 8 houses, and you just house hack one to the next, to the next, to the next. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But you do need to remember that time is money. And if you're interested in this strategy, I highly recommend checking out my friend Craig Kurloff's book, The House Hacking Strategy. Helocs, this is not something I've done, but home equity line of credit right now, it gives you extra flexibility because you pay it off. You're not stuck with it, but then you can loan against it. There are fixed rate Helocs. I'm not that familiar with them, but it's something to look into. Ask your bank or mortgage broker about if you have equity in your home. If you can get a fixed rate, and fixed rate should be like a mantra right now. Adjustable rates are the devil. We want fixed rate mortgages. So if you get a fixed rate HELOC, that's a major advantage. You can use that to buy a property and then pay it off, and you have a lot of flexibility there if rates go up. We are refinancing some of our older debt. Again, I do not believe it's too late. Local banks are by far the best bet. We've had very little luck with national institutions. And with large banks, they pretty much just said no. Large banks like homeowners and like giant apartments and commercial properties. In between investors, they don't, other than the 10 that Fannie will do. But just remember, you want to seek the longest fixed term possible. There is no reason to think inflation and interest rates are going to be going down. Again, maybe they will. Maybe Phil was wrong, but I do not think they're going down. And you want to invest in high cash flow properties. If you're taking equity out, you want to do something with it. Now is not the time to hold cash. And so high cash flowing properties are probably better than, say, looking for, because they're more, you have more, if they're high cash flowing versus, like, say, in a market you think is more speculative, maybe it will go up a lot. This is a volatile market, and in volatile markets, cash flow is king. So remember this, there's always a problem, there's always an opportunity. This is the key way to think of this. And but we're also entering a volatile market with high inflation. So a couple key points to remember for that. One is to maintain strong reserves with a major asterisk. The next is to screen properly, diligently screen. Keep up with rent increases. Emphasis on due diligence, but another asterisk. And don't sit on the sidelines. So with regards to maintaining strong reserves, cash is king. With that asterisk, remember there's an asterisk here, it's very important. They're Great by Choice, a book by Jim Collins, the guy who wrote Good to Great and Built to Last. I actually think this is his best book. Looked at companies that had very volatile were in very volatile economies or very volatile markets for their industry. And he looked at companies that did 10 times better than the market over the course of 10 years and compared them to comparable companies in the same industry that didn't do that didn't make the jump. And he found that the companies that held higher cash reserves, the 10x companies, the companies that were the ones that really made the jump, had 3 to 10 times as much cash on hand as the companies that didn't. Now, of course, I've made a statement before that you're not really a real estate investor unless you're cash poor. That kind of goes with the territory. It is a asset-heavy, expensive asset, so it's tough to maintain high cash reserves. But it is something to work for. Unfortunately, cash is king if it's in some sort of inflation hedge. I would not want to have just a bunch of money sitting around. But you do want to have something for a rainy day, something to jump on opportunities as they come, all sorts of things like that. But you usually probably want to be in an index, at least in an index fund, or at least a money market, something getting a bit of a return, because inflation is not going away. So you should expect higher delinquency with inflation and economic uncertainty and volatility. I've heard that foreclosures are taking up. I suspect evictions are taking up. If you have people who are being evicted, I'd walk them through the SAFER program. I think a lot of people don't know about that. A lot of tenants don't know about that. So I definitely make sure to research it. We just call them up and like, hey, go to this website, and do this, and fill that out. We can't do a form, but literally walk them step by step of how to get that money. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So there's a lot of rental. I mean, the same thing that's happening to the market for purchases and sales is happening to the market for rentals. Rental demand is very high, so you can afford to be a bit choosy. And this is not the time to skimp on that at all. It's always good to screen. It's always important to screen. Now is even more so. And if you want to learn how to do screening and property management, well, I highly recommend you check out this video by the presentation Phil gave at MAREI back in, I think, 2000. Was it 2017? I thought it was 2019. One of those years. So it's all still relevant, but just everything you need to know about property management, the Sirius brothers.
I thought Phil did the bad things.
He does the bad things.
Oh, okay.
In the past, he's done some good things.
Okay,
But I mean, actually, it's more of a hypothetical future where the contents of this presentation that didn't happen in the hypothetical future because we're erasing all record would happen. Keeping up with rents. So inflation is good for debt and bad for cash flow. So one of the great things about real estate is in a high inflationary environment, that makes everything's more expensive. It's harder to get materials. It's harder to get labor. Everything costs more. But your debt goes to nothing. It's like, so if 8.5%, if your dollar's losing that value, your loan is also losing value. You're losing the negative value of having that loan. So your debt is effectively reduced just because the dollar is losing value. But your cash flow becomes tricky because everything costs more, which means you can't really be a softie, or it's harder to be. If you can afford it and want to give your tenants a break, because everybody's having a bit of a hard time with all this inflation, that's all well and good. But if you're looking to grow, or if you're on the edge at all a little bit, this is the time to be relatively aggressive with rents. Now you've got to comp the market well. You can't just say, I'm going to throw rents up, hugely or whatever. But you do need to, you're not just ticking up a little bit. If you're way below market, it's it's time to bring those up, especially since there's a lot of rental demand, and you will be able to get that rented even if they choose to move. Just to FYI, rents increased 14% nationwide last year. Not as much in Kansas City at all, but they've been going up a lot. And just remember, real versus nominal. You need to think in that terms with a high inflationary environment. Focus on due diligence with the asterisks. So it's not the time to make a mistake. One bad deal can prevent you from doing the next 2 good ones. But you also have to be a balancing act, because especially if you're buying listed properties, which is extremely difficult to find good ones these days, many sellers just be like, no inspections, your earnest money is hard immediately. Less common with apartments and commercial properties, but still I've seen them where like they want very short inspections. They don't want, they want that earnest money to be hard because they know there's a ton of demand and they don't have to tolerate a buyer kind of waffling around a bit. So because of that, in many instances you almost are forced to do less due diligence.
Andrew, what does hard mean? So
when you earnest money, so you put earnest money down on a property, like you have a property under contract for $200,000, you put down $1,000, $2,000 of earnest money. That is refundable during the inspection period. It goes hard after usually 10 to 15 days for a house, in which case your earnest money is no longer refundable. If you back out of the deal, the earnest money will go to the seller. Now, oftentimes now, like it was like every time when I was making offers on our personal residence, it was everyone was like, don't even bother unless it's the third option, no inspections, earnest money is hard day one. So that means you have to assume more is wrong with the property than you see immediately. So add a contingency to your rehab budget, at least I do 20% is what I like to do. But just assume there's something there you can't see, especially since you won't be able to do as much due diligence until the market cools, which it is cooling some, but it's hard to know exactly where it's going to fall in at. And then again, I gave a presentation at the same time on everything you need to know about due diligence, and so that'd be a good presentation to check out on our YouTube channel and at MAREI as well. And the last one is just not to sit on the sidelines. This is saying, my brother has gotten a few things right. This is just saying, time in the market beats timing the market. And this is Peter Schiff. He predicted the 2008 housing crisis and wrote a book about it, all sorts of presentations, gave talks, talked about how, and then after it happened, he was very, very, very fond of himself, we'll say, and talking about how he did it. But the problem is he lost his hedge fund went down like 40 to 50%. He bought the wrong asset. He bought gold and silver and whatnot, and that did terribly. And then he's been predicting after that was hyperinflation back in like the early 2000s, and that Bitcoin would collapse any day now. And I'm sure it's just around the corner. But okay, this is Michael Burry. Michael Burry got it right. He got 2008 right. He predicted a housing crisis, and he made a ton of money. I think he was one of the characters in The Big Short. And he seemed to have done it again with GameStop, where there was that short squeeze, the Reddit short squeeze. And he predicted, he saw what was happening. He bet this big short against GameStop, and it was going to make a ton of money. And everybody thought he was a genius. And then they had to release their financials for his hedge fund, and he sold out before the run-up. He missed it. So timing the market, even these guys spend every day of their life studying it. They still miss it. And if you just think about going back to this number, like, even if, this is a long-term proposition. Timing the market might make you a little bit here, a little bit there, but when it comes to buy and hold, and I do highly recommend, eventually, flipping is great, wholesaling is fine, all these things are good. Eventually moving towards buy and hold is the way to build long-term wealth in real estate. That I strongly believe. And this is just proof of it, even if you miss the mark. Remember, if you bought right here, but you bought a cash flowing property and you had enough reserves to get over, a delinquent tenant or two, a bad turnover, by 2013 you're back to even, and by now you're doing just fine. So one last about inflation key. If inflation really gets high, some things to consider. This would be kind of hypothetical, but equity deals moving more towards raising equity. Syndications might be an option, or a partnership where the person you find somebody who brings a lot of the equity to the deal, you split the profits in a certain, and they get all their investment back and whatever profit there is, and you split the profits on it. Creative financing kind of became a thing during the 1970s and early 80s. That's when seller financing really took off because interest rates from banks were so ridiculous. So moving back towards that direction, if it gets going, seller financing at a lower interest rate than what the banks can offer is something to consider as well. And again, you need to keep up with rent increases. In a highly inflationary environment, remember, you need to, it's like the Red Queen. You need to increase rents just to stay still because everything is getting more and more expensive. So that will have to be, if hopefully we won't have that presentation of what to do in this ridiculously high inflation environment, but I mean, maybe that might be later this year. And again, YouTube, the Serious Brothers, Substack, Serious Brothers, also on Bigger Pockets. You can find me and MAREI. And if you're interested in that course, I'm going to be talking and all doing some live streams and some discussions together about being an investor agent, working with agents or working with investors as an agent. Please sign up for that course or let me know, and I'd be happy to talk to you. And that is it. But I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Oh, yes. Quick clap for Jeff West, right?